Welcome back to The Pulse. It is time for today's hot topic. And it will be region locking, changing the landscape of StarCraft, of eSports, and of this whole thing that we do here. What is region locking? It's the concept of saying, hey, I want to restrict this competition, making it so it can only include people from a certain region. WCS is our best example of a region-locked competition. We saw them hosting national events. We saw them hosting continental events, and that ultimately led up to a grand final that was, of course, a global event. Is region locking a good thing? Is it something that tournaments should entertain? Is it good for the players? We're going to discuss all of that right now. Guys, for starters, we're just going to bat it around. The whole idea of region lock, the whole idea of saying, hey, I'm going to host this event and I'm only going to let North Americans play in it. Is that good for North America?
I think it's definitely good for North America, Ben. Of course, it depends a lot on like in which degree you do it. Like if it's the only thing we ever see and we never see the North Americans go anywhere else, then it's probably not good. But I think a North American only event is still very exciting. I think it's very motivating for so many guys out there. And also, not just for the guys who are quite considered pro right now, maybe not as good as the Koreans, but still considered good. It is motivating for them. But what to think about that lower tier, about those ladder players? They know right now that they only have one more step to go to be at that level where they can, hey, I can actually make a decent payday if I make a top 6 at MLG, which is a lot more likely if it's an all North American event, or if there are 12 Koreans and 8 Europeans, for instance. So I think it will still be interesting, and I would always watch it. I find it very interesting and yeah, motivating to just find out, to see like, okay, who is the best player in America, who's the best player in Canada. I find that kind of stuff fun, and I definitely think for the players it's fun, and I think for the fans it's fun as well. So there is no more like, well, he had a better run, but he had a tougher bracket, and it's kind of hard to say. You can't really see it like that. If those two guys play against each other in 3-4 national tournaments in a year, I think that's very exciting. I would watch it.
You know, it's interesting because we're right now super saturated with a market that doesn't do region locking. The only time we've seen that, we're going to talk about later, but was WCS, which, you know, of course, group stages, and then you go on, and then it's like a semi-invitational, but they basically arbitrarily say this many people come from this region, yada, yada, yada. But I think one of the most important things that you have to keep in mind is that, to an extent, you will have a devalued tournament. And that's just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying that's good or bad, because obviously there's storylines that come around with that. But I'm just saying, what if we have this case where Vampire 7488 comes out of the ladder, right? And nobody knows about him, and he makes it to MLG. And yeah, it's a cool story, but realistically, that Vampire 7888 is taking Rain's spot.
Well, we'll get to that conversation in a minute. The real thing I want to address right now is it good for the player? No. It's not good for the player.
It is not good. It is not good for the player.
Dan.
I would say yes if you're talking about region, but I actually mainly agree with Andre, because we're talking about players in general when you're asking does it help a player, because there's only so much of the pie that can go out in money. And whether or not you're helping North Americans or you're helping the mid-tier Koreans who are better than the top North Americans, you're still hurting players in some regard by region locking. You can't help everyone. That's kind of the unfortunate thing. There's only 200 spots in Grandmaster, so a lot of it goes to Koreans. And North Americans, I mean, if you kind of exclusively said to North Americans, that means the Koreans won't be able to get to that. And that's just kind of like one example that you can use. You can't always just say, let's help everybody. You're going to have to hurt somebody somewhere.
That's definitely true. But like one last thing, for instance, if you take a look at football, or as you guys like to say, soccer in Europe, for instance, the Dutch league, probably out of Holland, really not a lot of people are interested in the Dutch league. I find it amazing, though. All my friends find it amazing, and I would say half the Dutch population finds it amazing. So you still have a very entertaining league. You have a lot of players, like a lot of Dutch players who make a living out of playing football in my country. Well, if you send them to England or to Spain or to Germany, no, they're not going to make it. Maybe a very select few is going to make it. Of course, it's a very different conversation, and I know you can't really compare both scenes right now because it's just a whole different level. But still, to some degree, like Dutch football wouldn't be very interesting if no Dutch players were playing in our Dutch league. And we give them also a chance to grow, and later on they might be able to make it to that Premier League. But in the early years, no, they won't be able to make it immediately. And for a pro gamer, it's the same. If you're never going to make an MLG pay cut in your first 6 MLGs, or NASL for that matter, because we are no different, it's like, how motivating is it to keep on playing?
All right, let's hold all thoughts for just a second. Okay. I've got a player on the line. Jan Todd Merlot, French Protoss player, established one of the greatest Warcraft 3 players of all time. Todd is also a very vocal player of StarCraft and a very vocal personality in esports. Todd, I want to send this question to you. What do you think about region locking from a purely player point of view?
I think it definitely can be good to some extent. It's a very touchy subject because I don't know too much about it, but you guys raised a few good points talking about WCS, talking about football. If I look at WCS, I see this tournament which had national qualifiers and then continental qualifiers and then the world finals. And I just thought this was so cool. So this might not exactly be the regional lock you talk about, but to some extent, I guess it is. And for a player, I have to say it's very good to get a chance to play against the best of your country and then your continent. And then if you win that in the world, we have the same thing in football. We have the championships in every country, like Kevin said, and then you have the Nations Cup. It's like Europeans, the World Cup with like all the countries, and all of those are obviously good to if you get to play in them, and you're given more chances regarding your level. Like if you're not on a world level, if you're like, say like me on a French level, you're a good player. This would definitely be better for me to play French tournaments rather than international. But then again, for the better players, they might not agree because they want to enter every tournament. So it's a very difficult question. I would say definitely there is a lot of players who would agree with that. This would be a good thing, but yeah, to some extent, like you would need to be more specific, like how exactly.
Okay. As a very high-level StarCraft II player, do you feel like if, for instance, we were to lock competition, say DreamHack IEM, let's say we made those events only playable for European players, do you feel like that would cultivate a better culture of esports players? Do you think it would be better for player development? Would players be more motivated to practice? Would they show better games? And would it ultimately grow the scene in an organic way that that I guess on the in the grand scheme of things is better globally? So like if it's happening in Europe, if it's happening in North America, if it's happening in Korea, and you've got these three scenes that are thriving independently, isn't that better on the grand scheme in the grand scheme of things?
You mean purely as a player?
Purely as a player. Would you be more motivated to practice if you knew you're only going to play against Europeans?
Yeah, but not just for the money. I think a lot of players will just think that they have a better chance to make the money, including me. But to make the game grow and everything, I feel it will be a lot better to just let everybody, or at least the way, for example, you mentioned IEM, the way they've been running their tournaments is just fine. But yeah, definitely, if they made the tournament Europeans only, and there will be no Koreans coming, it would definitely make the field easier. But yeah, I don't know. Again, it's very hard to picture exactly. Like you say, growing the community and develop things, but I don't think it would be better than now, definitely, for those things.
I mean, we almost have a region lock right now. When you look at the IEMs, the DreamHacks, even the NASLs, Korea only sends out a couple of Koreans. They're not like, okay, let's send out 20 Koreans and just sweep every single spot. They're sending out only 4 or 5 people, and it just so happens that they always take the top spots. And then the rest are foreigners. So I feel like even right now with the current tournaments, the DreamHacks, the IEMs, the ESLs, they're still really, really powerful, and they're still on almost like a region lock status. I feel like region lock, if we went even further and started to discriminate and segregate even more, it would really take away a lot of the achievements that some of these players could potentially be having if it wasn't region locked, if there were a good amount of Koreans. And not only that, I feel like it encourages players to identify themselves as having a disadvantage, because that's what it really is. You're really saying, okay, there's lesser skilled players that we want to get out there. Let's try to put them in this tournament. How do we do this? We region lock it. And it's affirmative action. That's what it comes down to. And we have to be very, very careful with this, because do we take the Darwin approach of let the strongest one stand, or do we try to cultivate those lower players? And I think there is a scene to cultivate the players to get them to that level. And that's the type of thing that players like I feel Naniwa and Huck are doing. They're going to Korea. They're trying to become better players. But that might be a little bit expensive. Maybe we have to look for other alternatives into going to that.
Kev, what do you want to say there?
Well, this is actually my exact problem with the way that some of these tournaments have been running right now. I feel that we keep saying and seeing the very few same Korean faces at the same European events. For instance, a DreamHack Bucharest or a DreamHack Valencia has 32 players, 32 excellent players, of which 4 of them are Korean, and the only guys that get paid are the top 4. Let's say Koreans take 2 out of 4 spots, maybe 3 out of 4. Like, is DreamHack Valencia or DreamHack Bucharest so much more fun to watch because there are 4 Koreans against 28 Europeans? Or would it be much more fun if you're going to remove those 4 Koreans, you have 32 Europeans, and kind of it's like the Wild Wild West, and you're just like, okay, who's going to win? Yeah, maybe Nurcho and Stefano are the favorites at Naniwa. But I finally feel that we have a super interesting tournament rather than, okay, you look at DreamHack Valencia, and there are actually quite some like really good level European players who look at that event and be like, Hero Tasia for GG, and then in Stefano Nurture, well, you know what, I'm gonna sit this one out because only the top 4 gets paid. Like, and I think that if those 4 Koreans wouldn't be there, I really don't think they add that much to the tournament. Because I even feel like you guys say like, okay, yeah, you're making the tournament the lowest skilled, and maybe that's true to some degree, but it's also the same story that always the same few Koreans who have the ability to travel because they are on a certain team and that team is willing to sponsor them to the tournament, they are the ones going. For instance, like if we would have actually see like a very nice rotation of a couple of Koreans, see a couple of the Casper guys come over, then I already feel it's a different story. I just feel it's always the same 3, 4, 5 players who finish very highly in a tournament that only has top 4 places paid, and I think that takes away a lot from, for instance, the motivation for a lot of European players. I can understand as a European player that it's a whole lot less motivating to go to a tournament where only 4 players get paid, and you see that 3 guys, 4 or 5 guys are going to be there who you just know are most likely going to take 3 of the spots.
I think you're blending too much of 2 issues. You're talking about will players be more motivated to play, but you're also talking about will fans watch, and you're kind of like, and even going back to your Dutch soccer league example, which is a really a very nice example, but you're talking more as a fan point of view. Fans want to identify with who they feel connected to, and we can't necessarily say just because it's all Europeans. What does North Americans identify? Why would they're a big market too to watch? Would they watch an all-European tournament? I'm not so sure, especially because the hours are also kind of awkward in itself.
WCS Europe was the most watched StarCraft II tournament of the year last year.
It is. But how much do we know that it's actually going to be, like, will a bunch of Europeans, because Koreans also love cheering for Koreans. That's also a fact. And there's also a market there as well. We can't just say the players will be doing that if you're ignoring what the fans will do. The fans won't watch what the fans want to watch.
It's also the official Blizzard tournament. I mean, they have a lot of marketing power behind that. How many StarCraft players, casual players have never heard of NASL, MLG, IEM, DreamHack? But because it's Blizzard's thing, it's like, oh, okay, I'll check it out. Even if you're not a StarCraft II player, it's like, oh, I'll check out what this BWC is or the WCS. I know Blizzard put it on, but it's a lot different to make that comparison.
I mean, by no means would I say that we should like region lock 8 out of 10 tournaments or something, because then it would indeed get perhaps boring, and then it doesn't really make a lot of sense because those fans in those scenes, they do want to see how their European stars or their North American stars face up against the Koreans. But right now, I feel that we are at a level where we have maybe 1 or 0 regional lock tournaments, and I think that is just like kind of the point of the discussion, that do you feel it's necessary that we at least have 1 or 2 a year? Because I personally feel that I think we should have that. I think it's awesome to know who is the best player in North America, who's the best player in France, for instance, who's the best player in Europe, who's the best player in Korea, and of course plenty of those tournaments we do want to see the Koreans travel. I do want to see the Koreans play against my favorite European players as well. I think that's awesome, but does it have to be in every single event throughout the entire year? Like, that's the point which I'm not sure about.
Todd, you've been awful quiet back there. Why don't you weigh in once more?
Yeah, I think diversity is very important. As a player, right now I feel like there's 3 types of tournaments. There's the tournaments where there's a lot of Koreans, like the last MLG Dallas or IPL, and those were very discouraging for me, I have to say. I mean, IPL, I meet Violet first round, and then he loses brackets. I just play 1 match against Calibre, which I win, and then I get to play Sniper. Yes, I couldn't do much better today. And tournaments where there is only a couple Koreans, where I feel like it's still possible for a foreigner to make it far and maybe win some money. And then you have the tournaments with only Europeans, where it's definitely easier, even though it's still pretty hard, obviously. But you have an even better chance to make money, but it doesn't feel nearly as interesting as if there is at least a couple Koreans. So I would have to say, for me, for now, the favorite is definitely the tournaments that have a couple Koreans, like Home Story Cup and all of these tournaments.
Well, it sounds like we're kind of starting to get into the conversation of, does it make sense for the event organizers? As an event organizer, can you sit down and say, I'm going to host this tournament, I want to make it compelling. Does it make sense for me to region lock it? If we look at the WCS example, their European finals were a wild success, but that is Blizzard. That is a very, that's the only time we ever had that. So maybe that's why a whole lot of people were tuning in. Does it make sense for an organizer to lock out their competition?
Yes and no, and I'm going to say yes because obviously it does give storylines, right? When you do region lock, it helps really develop storylines. This guy, the best French player, is he going to be able to take on the best Koreans in the best Korean tournament, the most prestigious StarCraft II tournament? Talking about Stefano and GSL. That's a great storyline to have when you have that kind of representation. But at the same time, no, because if tournaments just exclusively lock themselves to region locking, then they won't be able to really have themselves the best form of competition. I want to bring an example of someone like Life, right? Like Life took 2 years to really come out into the scene and show what he's made of, and Life has innovated the matchup a significant amount from his ZVT to his ZVP. The way Life plays is absolutely phenomenal, and he's arguably the best player in the world. But that kind of development took time. He said that if he didn't get into StarTale, then he wouldn't have been able to develop into the player he is today. And that has a lot to do with support for the middle to lower tier of even the Koreans. The game is stifled if you only just region lock and you don't allow the players to grow.
Well, but doesn't region locking grow the players because it's now more compelling to participate in those events? Like for me, for instance, I am not going to go to an MLG. I would never have a chance. But if I knew that I would only be playing against North Americans, that might motivate me to practice.
Doesn't that
You might win
stunt
it.
your goals, though? It stunts your goals completely.
Not at
Instead
all.
of saying,
If my goal is
world,
not compete at all versus all of a sudden I recognize an opportunity, so I am going to start competing, that now puts me on the path to doing something versus doing nothing. We've got players falling out of the scene left and right. Dark Force just retired. Cloud is currently or constantly emo about the difficulties in
he's
playing
very
in these.
Positive. How dare you?
But I mean, it's very disheartening, and you can. Todd just said it. It is very disheartening for a pro gamer to go into a tournament that he knows, well, damn, I might get 2 or 3 rounds into this, but eventually I'm going to play against a top 16 Code S player.
Then you get the Naniwas, the Hucks of the scene that says, I want to be the best player. I'm going to do as much as possible to get to that stage. And they take drastic measures to get to that ultimate goal. How many people in the scene have similar goals to Huck and Naniwa?
Andre. For instance, like I think all we're trying to say is that having a region lock tournament once in a while is like taking baby steps as a pro gamer to grow. What is the first tournament that Huck ever won?
MLG?
Yeah, Rally. How many Koreans were there?
Zero.
Okay, what's the first tournament Naniwa ever won?
MLG?
Yeah. How many Koreans were there?
Select.
Yeah. If you
0.
And like I really feel that those kind of things help them a lot throughout their entire career. And maybe Naniwa and Huck wouldn't have been the player they are today if back then there were already 10 Koreans at that MLG. And once more, like I just think it's an awesome way for a player to grow, to have that opportunity 2 or 3 times a year to play a tournament against only people. I mean, it sounds almost weird, but like you, like not the superior race from the East.
I also think now that you guys say it like that, I'm skewing it. I'm saying completely flip it. 100% of tournaments are now group stage. And I think now that I'm looking back at it, there has to be some sort of...
There has to be a
little bit of both.
We say there has to be.
There should be.
I do want to interject if I can. We're, again, deviating the conversation to the players. We're not talking about the tournaments. Tournaments need to run the best possible business. They are a business. Then MLG, they need to make money. IPL, they need to make money. Everyone, we need to make money, right? So that is a tournament organizer's goal. Region locking tournaments and making those kinds of region-only things initially is not going to give them back that returns at the very beginning.
Or does it?
It won't, because they can't. How are they going to run so many events across everything? They have to combine it. They have to do something like an arena, which is basically region locking, but they combine it all to one offline event to make it to cut costs. But even then, the arena is not back. The arena is not back, and that was a perfect example of region locking. So the tournaments itself can't afford to keep putting on so many events. Everyone says, why not have both? Because tournaments don't have resources to do that, and that's where I really feel organizers struggle.
It's a great point, Dan. We did reach out to Carmack, product manager for the ESL, for Turtle Entertainment, and for the Intel Extreme Masters, and he did have this to say on the concept of region locking from a tournament organizer's standpoint. He says, the right word we're looking for is balance. ESL, like any other organization, is looking for a healthy relationship between developing a healthy esport and developing a healthy business. One cannot exist without the other. A healthy business means that you have an interesting competition every time you hold an event, and you measure that with stream viewership numbers and in response to your product. This is why we decided to move away from limiting some of our events to participants just from a single continent. The results were always fantastic for Europe only, but elsewhere, not so much. It was a business decision to open up continental tournaments to participants from other countries, but it was an esports decision to make sure the host continent has a minimum of half participants in the event. IEM always makes sure that in Asia, for instance, half the players are Asian. We thereby ensure that an event held in Cologne has European identity, one held in New York has North American identity. The identity of events needs to be protected, needs to be represented, so forth and so on, etc. That's basically what Carmack said, which, quite frankly, kind of agrees with everybody here.
Yeah, I like this a lot. For the people who don't really know which process IEM went through, I guess at IEM Season 5 back then we still had this thing called Continental Finals. So there was a Continental European Final in Kiev, a Continental Final in New York, I believe, back then. There was one in Asia, and there was a Global Challenge as well. And then at the end of the year, there was a World Championship Finals. In Season 6, they said every stop from now on is going to be a Global Challenge. But, as they said, 8 players are going to be from the continent. So if we have a tournament in Brazil, 8 players will be from South America. We tournament in Europe, 8 players will guarantee to be from Europe, the rest 2 Americans, 2 maybe Southeast Asia, 4 Asians. And I like this a lot already. Yes, it's still hard for a Western player to make a good payday, but hey, IEM, I would say out of all the tournaments, is quite often one where we have really cool storylines. I mean, Idra back then won the Global Challenge in China, and that's definitely not the only one.
Todd, I'm going to kind of send our final question to you immediately. Would you like to see more tournaments adopting the policy of region locking?
I think my answer is yes, but to a certain extent. I don't want players who are practicing a lot and deserve to be in tournaments to not be allowed to go to those just because there was a region lock or something. So for me, for example, WCS, in my opinion, was one of the best tournaments in that regard because it really gave a chance to everybody. Everybody in France could play in the French event, and then those that qualified for the Europe finals went there. They played and they had another chance to qualify for the World Finals. It was like this for a lot of countries, a lot of continents. But if some tournaments want to really limit who plays in it and region lock it, maybe, I don't know, it's so hard to say. I would say more yes than no, but then again, if I see that some players who deserve to be in the main tournament or I think could have taken part instead of me, in it, and they don't get to just because the tournament was region locked, I would feel really bad. So maybe that's just me.
I think we can probably all agree to sum this up in one very simple way. We do need some regionalized competition. It's important that it happens in some capacity. These national events are very special. The continental events are awesome.
Yes.
And of course, the global final is always going to be very, very exciting. But if all of a sudden everything were region locked, I think you're going to really stagnate the entire StarCraft II.
I totally agree with that. Of course, like we shouldn't go over the top with it. That would be wrong. But like it happens in every single sport. Like every sport has European championships. Every sport has world championships. And yes, a guy who might be the best player in the world in, let's say, darts, and he's from the USA, which is very unlikely because I believe they're very good in darts in England. But let's say the best player of the world playing darts is in USA. He is not allowed to play in the European Championships, and yes, that sucks for him because he probably would have won that tournament if this world would have existed, which it doesn't. But like it's fine for it happens in every sport. There will always be very good players who are not allowed to play in certain region locked competitions.
You know, and the CSL is starting with it. I think that's the first organization.
Hey, it's a great example.
That is really trying to cultivate a scene that doesn't focus just on the pro scene.
And it's such a grassroots level, man.
It's a grassroots level, and I think now we need something, not just college people. We need someone that are outside of college.
We need another big WCS.
Yes.
We need another huge international thing like
How
that.
cool would it be if Usain Bolt gets really mad because he's not allowed to win the European Championships?
All right. Well, for the first time ever, I think we can all say that we agree on our hot topic. So that was a lot of fun. Todd, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with us. Do you have any final thoughts for our topic, for our viewers, or for yourself before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I mean, you just said it yourself, but I feel like we need maybe a little bit diversity. Right now in StarCraft, there's the tournaments and the leagues, and that's it. We don't really have big satellite tournaments like WCS happen very often. So I feel like if we have more tournaments like those, that could be the region-locked tournaments that you just talked about, and I think it would be interesting to have some diversity. So thanks to you guys for having me on the show, and I miss you guys, by the way.
Oh, we miss you, Jan. I'm gonna
We'll
go
eat some Krispy Kreme tonight.
Maybe just you, Kevin.
and a Pazuki.
Oh
Todd, did you hear about Kevin's Krispy Kreme challenge?
No.
Okay. Well, we're gonna bust this out right now. I'm gonna announce this.
Okay.
Kevin has
8. Okay. 8.
Oh my God.
9.
This is disgusting.
9.
Whatever.
It's going to be 9.
Oh my God.
Originally, it was 12. Kevin is convinced that he can run 1/4 of a mile, one lap around your
athletic
regulation
field.
400
track.
meters.
400 meters in 90 seconds.
Oh my God.
Do you think Kevin can do that, Todd? 90 seconds, 400 meters.
Yeah, what does it have to do with Krispy Kreme?
We're getting there.
Maybe if he practices, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess.
Now,
I think so.
to really beef up the deal, he said he's going to do it while eating 9 Krispy Kreme donuts.
Why? Why after?
Wow.
Give me
That's more
odds.
interesting.
Give me odds. I'll take
Do
it.
it after and try to throw up less than 9 times.
All right, buddy. Well, we miss you very much as well. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. We're gonna let you go now. Jan Todd Merlo, StarCraft II pro gamer, French powerhouse, and overall great guy. That's kind of going to wrap up our hot topic, guys. We are going to take a very short break. When we get back, it's that time again. We're going around eSports. We're going to be brought up to speed. And
you know why, man? For eSports.
Don't go anywhere, guys. You're watching the Pulse.